Hello guys, it's good to see you again here. This is the second video, and this one is about how you can turn the rough draft into a manuscript. It's a process that includes two stages. First one is revision and another is editing. Revision deals with how to, well, change several elements of the text in terms of the story, the whole story, or the smaller elements. And editing is related to fixing the language. People also call this stage proofreading. Okay, to make it quick, let's now go to the screen here. Yeah, we are turning your rough draft into a manuscript. Manuscript is the draft that you submit to a magazine, newspaper, or publisher if you want your work to be published. How do we do that? Well, so far, let us remember that you have completed two rough drafts. The first one is the idea that you developed at the beginning, and the second one is what you did last week. Now, let us turn those two rough drafts into manuscripts. How can we do that? First of all, we need to remember that here we are learning literature. Not only writing about literature, but literature in general and appreciating literature. You have taken a literal reading class. You have taken inferential reading, extensive reading, popular literature, introduction to literature, and many others, including now literary appreciation. Basically, you know theories about literature, theories about the forms of literature. Now let's apply that knowledge in our writing process. In prose, we know about characters and characterization. You know that there are two types of characters, at least, the flat character and round character. You need to use this in your stories. You also know that characterization can be explicit and clear, and it can also be through the words of the characters, through the dialogues, through the actions, and through the responses of our characters to other characters. Many other theories about characters, basically, you know many of them. And we also learned about settings. We have temporal settings, settings of time, and spatial settings, settings of place. Use that, and you also know that settings can also symbolize ideas in the story. You can use that later on. Now, what I want to highlight today is about plot. There are so many types of plots. Sometimes flashback, sometimes straight, and so on, basically. Now, there's one element of plot that I want you to be aware of in your writing. What is that? It's called foreshadowing. Foreshadowing means the indication of what comes later at the end of the text. The best example of foreshadowing is what we have in Anton Chekhov's stories. If there is a death at the end of the story, then at the beginning, there should be a cause of death. The writer will provide a cause of death. In the case of Anton Chekhov's stories, we have the so-called Chekhov's gun. If at the beginning of the story there is a gun, then it might explode somewhere and kill somebody. So if you want to give a death at the end of the story, you need to have something that causes the death at the beginning of the story. If you want to provide love at the end, then start with a crush at the beginning, or maybe hate, or something that indicates the end later on. If, for example, you have some kind of victory at the end of the story, then at the beginning provide hope so that the victory will be, well, logical. There is a cause for that. Okay. There are many others, but please remember foreshadowing as you prepare your stories. Now, what do you need to revise? These are points that you can revise in writing your story. The first one is make sure that your story has changes or conflicts. These are very important. As I told you in the previous video, turns or changes are the soul of a narrative. And then make sure you have this. If your story doesn't have this, then you might need to revise it. The second thing is that you want to give a twist at the end of the, if you want to give a twist at the end of the story, make sure you provide the foreshadowing, the one I just mentioned to you earlier. So if you want to give a love at the end of the story, provide the crush or something that indicates, that leads to the love. If you, you also need to decide what message actually, as a writer, you want to give to your readers. This is something that you don't have to tell anyone. Okay, you are the writer, you have the right to keep anything, to hide anything, but you do need to have this kind of message. And in the case of our course, yeah, you need to tell me because you are still learning to write this story, right? And then you check the grammar again. Make sure to make the grammar consistent. If you want this story to be set in the past, then using past tense is the best way, and which is the most common way as well. If you want to make it more, well, impactful, you can make it in the present tense. Then, you need to give the story a good title. Many of the stories you submitted last week and 2 weeks ago didn't have titles at all. So you need to think about that. And finally, you need to present the short story in the format that we use in our class. Or later, if you want to submit it to a magazine, then use the format that is common in that magazine. Basically, you follow the convention. And in our case, this is the format that I'm offering to you. You need to put the title, your name, and number of words. This is important because we want to know how many words we are going to read. And it is, it makes the text convenient to the readers. If they know that this has such and such number of words, then I will have to spend maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes to read it. So it's a convenience for the readers. All right, for this one, that's all I have to say, guys. If you have any question, feel free to reply to this, and we will continue with the next or last stage of this meeting or this week. Right? Thank you very much.